Nainoa has said that early on he was hindered by a fear of failure.
Oh, yeah.
How do you know how he resolved that? Because he certainly succeeded.
Courage. He resolved it by being courageous, I think. It was Nainoa's job to be the first Hawaiian in perhaps 1,000 years to, after that devastating accident and devastating loss of Eddie Aikau, to take the canoe as navigator on the first voyage in 1,000 years that a Hawaiian has navigated. So naturally, he was fearful. He was fearful for his own ability, but he was fearful for his people. Because if he failed, that would have been, Hawaiians. Yeah. Mm. I have the feeling that that his father helped him understand that there's a deeper mission, that everything is based on helping your community, helping your people, and that your fear or your immediate reluctance is nowhere near as important as pushing through it to get that mission accomplished.
In researching his book, Hawaiki Rising, Sam Lowe spent hours interviewing his cousin, Nainoa Thompson, talking to him about the double-hulled canoe Hokule'a and what drove his dream to voyage in the wake of his ancestors. Sam Lowe, next on Long Story Short.
Long Story Short with Leslie Wilcox is Hawaii's first weekly television program produced and broadcast in high definition.
Aloha mai kako. I'm Leslie Wilcox. Sam Lowe was born and raised in Connecticut. His Hawaiian father left the Big Island to attend prep school on the continent, where he got married, never to return home again. Their son Sam inherited his father's love of the ocean and of boats and grew up spending summers at the beach on Martha's Vineyard, where he still lives at the time of our conversation in 2014. Sam Lowe made his first trip to Hawaii as a young naval officer and has been coming here ever since, connecting with his family that includes Nainoa Thompson. Sam's background as a documentary filmmaker, his ocean skills, and his family connections eventually led him to become a crew member on Hokule'a, where his role on the voyaging canoe was that of the documentarian. His job was to observe, and through that, he got to experience what life is like sailing on a canoe in the middle of the ocean, thousands of miles away from land.
My role on Hokulea has always been as a writer and as a documenter. Usually on Hokulea, you're a crew member, and so that's basic. You know, you stand your watch and you do all that. But you have another role as well, which is you could be a cook, you could be a watch captain, you could be a carpenter, you could whatever. And my role was as documenter. And so that fit, you know, what I had been doing for so many years prior to that, going out and documenting, either filming or writing about or doing a thesis at Harvard about a way of life that I wanted to bring back and I wanted to give you. I wanted you to have this gift. I have seen this, I have been there, and now I want you to have it. And that was a perfect blend of what the job was as a documenter, the kuleana, or actually as any crew member, the kuleana and Hokulea.
Isn't it interesting that all your interests sometimes come together and inform each other into one wonderful culmination?
Yeah, I probably never would have gotten on the canoe if it hadn't have been that I did have this skill of being able to write. And of course, it didn't hurt that Nainoa was my cousin, and I had a relationship with him. I was invited on the voyage to Rapanui, and that was actually my first trip on the canoe. The voyage to Rapanui was supposed to be the hardest voyage because the prevailing winds are against you. And so Nainoa had predicted that it would have to be tacking into the wind. So this would be a zigzag all the way. So what was maybe, I think about 1,700 miles could easily become 3,000 miles if you had to tack. So he chose a veteran crew. He had on board those folks like Taba Taupu and Michael Tong and Snake Ahi and Bruce Blankenfeld and, you know, the Kalapa Babayan. the best of the best. They set off. Now, I should say that this was the first voyage that I was actually invited to go on, but Nainoa wasn't quite sure about me. I had made one voyage on the escort boat and that went fine. So he just wasn't sure, and he put me on the escort boat, and he said, you're going to be on the escort boat for 4 or 5 days. We're going to see how it goes, and if everything's going okay on the canoe, then we bring you over.
Why was Nainoa unsure about whether to have you on the Hokule'a?
Well, I think
because you're a waterman, you've been around water all your life in different kinds of craft.
Right, but you have to remember that on that voyage, there were the tested men. They were the best of the best. These men had made, had probably voyaged 30,000, 40,000 miles. Not only that, they're surfers and they're athletes and they're,
And didn't I figure you could document it just as well from the escort boat?
I think he knew I couldn't do that. But I think he wanted to just be sure. I think he wanted to go out and to see, and if it was a slog, and it was what he expected it to be, the most severe test of endurance, then maybe I would have stayed on the escort boat. But it didn't turn out that way. It turned out to be easier, and so I think that's why he invited me to.
So it had to do with physical
training,
conditions, not fit?
Not fit. Not like those guys, no. Those guys, well, look at them. I mean, look at Tava, look at Snake. All of those guys are watermen all the time. You have to remember, in New England, it's the winter. So I get to swim 4 or 5 months out of the year. I was not in the kind of shape that those guys were, so I think that's what his reservation might have been. So I think on the 5th day, we got word that they wanted me to go over, and I'm like, yes! And it was one of those rainy, kind of drizzly days, not a lot of wind, and I was rowed over by one of the crew on the escort boat, and Hokulea's up here, and I kind of crawled in. You crawl over the hulls, and then you crawl up over this canvas kind of spray shield. And I remember crawling out and looking up, and there was Mike Tong, who is like this. His appearance is like this gentle, loving Buddha. He has that kind of loving appearance, and the rain was just dripping down off his face like this, and he's looking down at me with this beneficent smile. He didn't say a word. It just, welcome, good to see you. And so I just immediately felt at home with Mike's blessing. He's such a veteran on that canoe. But we had, Nainoa had felt that we had to be prepared for this slog upwind. But as it turned out, fortuitously, at that time of year, down in the roaring 40s, I hope I'm right, but I think that we are probably up around 20 degrees south. And down around 40 degrees south, there were a number of low-pressure areas that were spinning storms up toward us, spinning wind up toward us. And so they broke the trade winds, and they created following winds. So that Nainoa, seeing that, set off basically in a storm and sailed along with the wind coming from behind, spun up by these storms down in the roaring 40s, until that storm went through, and then we were kind of becalmed. And then the trades would fill in again, we'd do a little tacking, and then another storm would come along. And we made the trip so much faster than was predicted that we got there a week before our welcoming party was.
Nice when storms are your friend, I see.
Yeah. So it turned out to be a lot easier in terms of the crew and in terms of the endurance than we thought it was going to be. More difficult from the navigation point of view, because often you'd have cloudy skies. In fact, on that voyage to Rapanui, 2 or 3 days before we found the island, Nainoa found the island, we started to have cloudy skies, and he had no real sight of his guiding star. He was steering pretty much by swells, and he was steering by, and he was navigating by dead reckoning. So for 3 days, he was navigating by instinct, trained instinct. And on the day that we sighted Rapanui, the wind shifted. He was going to do a zig, and instead of doing a zig, the wind shifted and kind of pushed us in the direction that he thought we wanted to go. And he said, we follow the wind. We just stay, we'll follow the wind. Hokulea knows where she wants to go.
No, when he can't navigate by stars, does he sleep at all? I mean, because he's always watching current conditions. Right?
Yeah, he is. Well, when you're not navigating by the stars, you're navigating pretty much by the swells and the wind. Of course, the wind was gyrating around and changing, so he's using the swells to navigate. Normally, if he's alone on a voyage, then he will sleep in cat naps. He'll sleep for maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and then jump up and be awake for, say, 8 hours, and then lie down for 20 or 30 minutes and jump up, and he'll do this for 30 days at a time. One of his great fears on that first voyage in 1980 was that he wouldn't be able to stay awake. That's Mao's secret, not mine. I can't do that. But it was one of those first, as he calls them, the doors of perception that opened. One of those first doors that opened was that when they set sail out of Hilo and started on the voyage, after about 14 hours, he decided he was really tired. He was going to take a little nap. And he lay down for about 15 or 20 minutes, and he jumped up, and he was refreshed. And he said that was the first kind of sense that there is something in navigation, there is something in accepting the challenge and the risk that comes from another level, and that he was able to do that on that first voyage, and that's what he normally does. On this voyage, the Rapanui voyage, he had Kalepa Babayan on board, he had Bruce Blankenfeld on board, he had trained navigators with him, so he could sleep.
If you don't have enough sleep for enough time, I mean, I would think your judgment becomes impaired. So I guess it's you have to have a limited goal in terms of time.
Well,
how do you do
he
that?
does it for a month at a time.
Amazing.
I have no idea. I couldn't do it.
So maybe because you have a goal and you're trained and you're generally in good shape, you can manage your mind and your brain cells for that amount of time.
Yeah, it's still sort of it's a mystery to me how he can do it. You know, it's always chicken skin when if you're a crew and or a documenter, particularly my job being to watch and to everybody and to record. But, you know, I've watched Nainoa pretty intently. And it's always that moment when he says, post lookouts, land is near. And then I would get to go to ask him, well, what's going on? He'd say, well, I think Rapanui is there. And he put Max Yaro Amai, who is Carolinian, who has great eyesight. He put him on watch. And about 5 hours later, there it was, Rapanui. And it was pretty much where he said it was. And Rapanui is tiny. And so he found this island after 1,700 miles.
After sailing to Rapanui, Hokule'a navigator Nainoa Thompson invited Sam Lowe aboard the canoe for the trip home. This second experience gave Sam even more insights into how Nainoa used nature and his intuition based on experience to guide him to exactly where he wanted to go.
The second voyage I got to make was from Tahiti to Hawaii, and we'd been at sea for I think about 24, 25 days. Had lots of storm on that particular voyage, lots of squalls. I'm going to say it was the 25th day, I forget exactly. Nainoa turned the canoe downwind. We'd been headed into the wind all the time to get to the east of the Hawaiian Islands, and he turned downwind. So we knew something was up. And steering downwind on Hokulea, the sails are on either side, wing on wing, because the wind is directly from behind. And we were steering that way for a while. We couldn't see anything. There was this gentle mist wafting over the canoe. You could feel the sun, but you couldn't see it. Visibility ahead was maybe, I don't know, half a mile.
And during this time, do you say, hey, Nainoa, what's going on? Or do people not talk about what's up?
I got to be bratty because I was the documenter. So I didn't say anything for a while, but we went wing on wing, and then one of the wind changed slightly, and so one of the sails came over. So now we're sailing like this. We felt that. And around 6 o'clock, I saw Nainoa was just back there on the navigator's platform, just peering intently ahead. Again, this mist was coming over. We couldn't see anything. I couldn't see anything. So being a documenter, I get to go back and say, what's going on? He said, well, Hilo is right there. After 2,500 miles, 25 days, Hilo is right there. So I said, how do you know? And he said, well, you remember when the sail, when we couldn't sail wing on wing? Well, that's because we got into that place where the winds are coming and being broken by Mauna Loa and Mauna Kea and turning around the island. And so that wind shift, that gentle wind shift, told me that we'd gotten into that zone where the winds are breaking. These mountains are 14,000 feet high. And he said, you look ahead, you see that mist seems to stall. It seems to slow down. So I looked. Okay. Keep going. I know I couldn't see it. And he said, if you look, the sun was starting to go down. If you look on either side, you can see it's kind of dark ahead of us, and it's a little bit lighter there.
You couldn't see it?
I couldn't see it. And so I wrote it all dutifully down. And then we sailed on for a while, and then he tacked. And I said, well, why'd you tack? He said, well, we're on the Hamakua coast, and I don't want to get too close. Of course, none of us can see this. I don't want to get it's after 25 days. I don't want to get too close. And Hilo's right over there. And so I said, okay, write it down. And then we all felt it. And we all went over to the rail. And the whole crew is standing there looking. And then they know Nainoa said Hilo's there. And they know Hamakua must be there. And we waited for about 15 minutes. And then fortuitously, that low cloud layer lifted, just lifted. And there it was, the twinkle of the coast, Hilo over here, the lighthouse. And at that moment, Nainoa just said, we're home.
Wow.
After 25 days. So that's the chicken skin, that when you're navigating with someone like Nainoa or Kalepa Babayan or Bruce Blankenfelder or Chad Paishan or any of these, Shorty Berleman, any of these great navigators who have dedicated their life to merging with the signs of the sea. And you have the privilege to be on a canoe after that much time and to see land is there exactly where they say it is.
What happens over the 25 days, say, of a voyage? Is there a lot of talk? Is there a lot of laughter? What do people do day by day?
I think it depends a lot on the crew and on the chemistry of the crew, and I think it's all of that. But if I think back on it, I think more of a kind of quietness, actually. I don't think so much of laughter, there's that. I don't think so much of talk, there's that. I don't think so much of music, although there's that. I think of the quietness of being at sea and the feeling of being out in an immense ocean, completely alone, and you don't see another ship, you don't see another person, you don't see land, and you get into kind of a rhythm of watchstanding, of being alert and being relaxed and being alert and being relaxed, of the stars turning and the moon and the sun. And there's a blending with that diurnal rhythm so that it's a meditation. You get into, I think it's a meditational state. I think it's a very relaxed state. I think that even in a storm, aboard a vessel like Hokulea, which is so staunch and so seaworthy and so sea kindly, that you're not afraid. You know that if you do everything right, if you follow the instructions of your captain, if you bring the sails down, if you stand your watch properly, you'll be fine. So that's not it. It's not anxiety, it's not fear, it's contemplation, it's meditation. And actually, I think for most of us, say after 5 or 6 days, you're just in the rhythm. And then when the canoe turns down and the navigator says we're there, we're almost sort of like saying, well, that's good. We can have a hamburger, we can have a beer, but why don't we just keep going? Because you're in this world, this completely, you're with your crew, you're with the weather, you're with the canoe, you're in this meditational, almost Buddhist, Hawaiian meditational state, and you don't want it to stop.
Wow.
Sam Lowe started working on a book about Hokule'a after he returned home from the Rapanui voyage in the year 2000. At first, he didn't know what would be in the book, but it finally came together, and Hawaiki Rising was published in 2013. It tells the story of Hokule'a, Nainoa Thompson, and the Hawaiian Renaissance.
there was a period of time, and I think it was 2010. So I've been working on this book for 10 years. I mean, I didn't really know that I'd been working on it for 10 years. I was just recording and I was writing articles. The first idea for a book would be a picture book, and then I went off and did my grandpa's book, and I got partway there, and then came back onto this. But there was a time, I think it was 2010, when I did have a chance to interview Nainoa very extensively. I was living in the family compound, and so the guest house is, 100 yards from his house, and I would sit and wait, and every time he came out, I'd say, "Hey, Nainoa, how you doing?" And he'd say, "Not today, Sam, not today." "Okay." And then, "How you doing?" "Yeah, okay, come." And so we'd sit and spend 2 or 3 hours with a tape recorder, and I think the exchange did help him bring together all his experience as well. It was certainly great for me because I was able to get this raw material for Hawaiki Rising. But I think it also helped him formulate his own, bring together his own experiences and correlate that and put it together into kind of a set of values and a set of philosophy. It's his philosophy, but I think in being able to exchange with another person who he was fairly intimate with, that it did help him in that. And at that time, about 3 years ago, the concept of mo'olelo became very important. And he expressed that. He said, we stand on the shoulders of heroes, and it's very important that as we move forward around the world, that we look back and that we celebrate and bring with us the spirit of those people who made all this possible and the lessons that we learned from them, from his father, Myron Pinky Thompson, from Mau Pialig, from Wally Froiseth, from Ben Finney, from Herb Connie, from all of those that who had built the canoe, who had the vision of the canoe, who had sailed the canoe, and that evolving vision, that gift that they gave to all of us who sailed on the canoe. He wanted that to be celebrated. And part of that was was the book, Hawaiki Rising. It is a celebration of those heroes whose shoulders we stand on today. He expresses in Hawaiki Rising very clearly how fearful he was of that time, of his first voyage. You have to understand that everything depended on it, that the canoe had capsized, that they had lost Eddie Aikau, and that Hawaiians were on the cusp of being able to, through voyaging, and all the other arts as well, not just voyaging, but Hokulea was the symbol of the Renaissance, through voyaging to recapture this great pride of ancestry, and the canoe had capsized. There was a great deal of anxiety, which he expresses in the book, and he pushed through, and he discovered deeper reserves, I think, of courage and of a sense of connection to his ancestors that allowed him to enter a world of understanding and of comprehension that was deep and that was powerful.
You went back and talked to a number of the people we associate with the Hokulea over the years. What did some of those conversations yield in terms of insight about the voyages?
Well, they were key. The book is made up of what I like to think of as a chorus of voices. I'm not in it. It's not my story. I'm the person that's behind the camera, if you like, or that's writing the story, singing the song, I hope. But I had this opportunity to interview dozens and dozens of crew members, and I wanted the book to be a chorus of voices. I wanted it to be told in the voices of the people that experienced it, not an impersonal narrator, a personal narrator. And I didn't know that would work. It's like an oral history, and I've been very interested in oral history, something told directly, authentically from the person who experienced it. So the opportunity, and of course I was very kind of shy and bashful. I mean, Tava Taupu and Snake Ahi and Herb Kane and Nainoa and Pinky and Marion Lyman Mercereau and Dave Lyman. And I mean, these are heroic figures to me. So to have the honor that they would sit down and talk with me was terrific, and I didn't want that to end. You know, so writing the book is, you had to eventually do that, right? But the great pleasure was to have those moments, those intimate moments with people whose shoulders we all stand on, and to have them tell me their story. That in itself was the process, is sometimes more important than the product.
Through the eyes and ears of Sam Lowe, we all get to experience what it's like to sail aboard Hokule'a as she makes her way across vast oceans, guided by the stars and other natural elements to faraway destinations. Mahalo to Sam Lowe for sharing his stories with us, and mahalo to you for joining us. For PBS Hawaiian Long Story Short, I'm Leslie Wilcox. Ahui ho.
For audio and written transcripts of all episodes of Long Story Short with Leslie Wilcox, visit pbshawaii.org. To download free podcasts of Long Story Short with Leslie Wilcox, go to the Apple iTunes Store or visit pbshawaii.org.
Pinky, evolved a philosophy that came out of voyaging. He said, you first have to have a vision. And you have to have a vision of an island over the horizon. And once you have that vision, then you have to formulate a plan to raise that island from the sea, Hawaiki rising. And then you need to have discipline to train to achieve that plan. And then you need to have the courage to cast off the lines. And then you need to have the aloha to bind your crew together to find the island. So those are values that were inherent in Pinky's view in voyaging and also in the world, and also all cultures of the world. So he brought this philosophy from the past, brought it to the present, and made it a possible future. And Hokulea is voyaging around the world with that philosophy in mind.